speaking of corporate earnings, Apple definitely in the crosshairs here, announcing that it's not going to meet its revenue targets. What does this mean for Apple investors, both in the short term this quarter and what it could mean for the remainder of the year?
Sure. Well, I think there's two things with Apple. The first is 2020, and then the second is beyond. In terms of 2020, Apple's really being hurt two ways. The first is they get about 15% of their revenue from China. Not all of their stores are back open over there. And then also they're having an issue with parts. A lot of the supply chain for Apple is parts manufactured in China. There's a question of how fast that is going to ramp back up again. Right now we're hearing from reports out of Asia that the supply chain's not going to be back fully online until sometime in May. And I think that also causes a question for later in 2020, are any of their new 5G handsets going to be delayed in the fall? I do think for Apple, though, that demand is just being pushed out. It's not really being canceled. So we would expect those units to come back at some point. The question is it going to be in this fiscal year?
Yes, a huge year, as you mentioned, for the 5G rollout. So do you think that the bigger impact or story here with Apple is more on the supply side, how they're going to shift their plans to counteract that, more than on the demand side that's just pushing out the handset sales later in the year?
I do think it's going to be a slower year for smartphone sales. IDC was originally using up 1.5% for smartphone shipments, so that's for the whole industry, not just Apple. They've now lowered that number to minus 2.3%. So I do think it's going to be a tough year, but I would expect sales to really rebound strongly for them in 2021.